Hi, everybody, and welcome to this month's This.JavaScript. Very excited to have everybody. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quickly for some slides. Just give me 1 second. Can everyone see my screen? Y'all good? Rachel, anybody?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Well, so This.JavaScript is an event that happens every single quarter, and it's really here to help people keep up with the advancement of different frameworks and libraries and browser standards within the front-end world. So we are very excited to have some core people here today talking about upcoming releases, recent milestones, and community initiatives. Today we'll be having Brendan Eich, who is the founder of Brave, also the creator of JavaScript, giving us an update on Brave. We also have Paul Kinlan, who is on Google DevRel and on the Chrome team, talking about the state of Chrome. We have Patrick Kettner as well for Microsoft Edge. He's a program manager for Microsoft Edge, talking about the state of Edge. And then substituting Matt, I wasn't able to get your picture in time, Josh, but Josh is on the Mozilla DevRel, and he's going to be talking about state of Firefox and today is your guys' big release, right? So very excited.
Very busy and excited.
Yes. And then we also have Paul Frazee, who's going to be giving us a state of Beaker, the Beaker browser. Rachel Andrew is our special guest from the W3C CSS working group. Did I have that right, Rachel? It's such a mouthful.
That's right, yes.
Awesome, great. So we will be doing basically a 10-minute, everybody will be giving a 10-minute update, and then we'll be having some amazing conversations led by myself and Rachel for the different browsers and the different updates and things that are coming on. So feel free to ask questions within the chat. My name's Tracy. I am the co-founder of a company called This, where we basically like to feature and do exciting things related to JavaScript. And then we also do what my friends like to call celebrity consulting, where we try to mentor companies through their JavaScript problems. We've done a lot of really awesome events. So every other month or every other quarter, we feature the state of frameworks and libraries. You can find all these on our website, actually. So if you go to this.co/JavaScript, under previous events, you're able to watch all the different live streams of these different types of events. So it's pretty cool to watch and see the community come together. So with that, I wanted to go ahead and pass it off to Paul, who will be giving us initially a state of Chrome update.
Hello. Cool. Right, I'll give it a go. My name is Paul Kinlan. I lead our Chrome and Web Developer Relations team. We've just got off the back of the Chrome Dev Summit, so a lot of this kind of has probably been somewhat covered, but I've got some new stuff to sprinkle in. I've got a lot to get through as well, so I'll try and be as quick as possible. The major focuses of what we've been working on over the last 6 months are all around the progressive web app space at the moment, and that kind of continues our overall narrative of like where we're trying to push the web at the moment in terms of kind of rich capabilities, installability, and integration on the platforms. One of the things that we've been trying to work on is a kind of a slightly different framing of what progressive web apps means. And the idea is that they should load fast in theory. They should integrate with the user's device. They should be reliable, and they should ultimately be engaging and kind of keep the user in the experience at that point. That's a little bit different from kind of previous framings that we've talked about, where we talk about like 12 different kind of attributes and characteristics. But I think it kind of sets the scene for like everything that we're trying to do inside Chrome at the moment in terms of improving kind of general web presence more broadly. So I think the thing that we're seeing is we are seeing kind of some success. I mean, this is a piece of data that was given out from kind of people who have been starting to kind of deliver better web experiences, Trivago. They've kind of deployed a progressive web application, which has seen a massive improvement in kind of their conversions and engagement. One of those things has been driven by kind of one of the attributes of progressive web apps, which is the kind of the add to home screen, or kind of what people know as installability. So we're pretty happy with the state of where this has gone and where this is getting to at the moment, which is pretty good. But there's still a lot more to do. Like, we're not completely integrated onto kind of each of the users' devices and operating systems. We've still got kind of slow experiences. Chrome could be better at kind of performance and memory usage and a whole bunch of other things. But we are starting to see more and more partners and developers at this point, external developers, especially in kind of the more traditional Western markets, actually starting to adopt better, more integrated web experiences. So Starbucks have just recently released their progressive web application, which allows you to install the Starbucks progressive web app. It allows you to kind of, generally like show the barcode that you got to be able to scan and kind of get your coffee for free, or not for free, but through the kind of the barcodes. Pinterest and Instagram's a really interesting experience where they don't. It's not there to compete with their native app experience. It's there to kind of target users who potentially don't have the space on device or the actual kind of ability to actually have I want to say fast connections. Primarily kind of the Indian market is a good example. But they've been able to build these experiences which work offline, which can post even when, in theory, post like videos and images even when you're offline. So they're getting to this point of really complex and comprehensive user experiences, even on the mobile web at this point, which I think is pretty good. And it's all kind of driven behind, and this is our biggest focus that we've had for the last 3 or 4 years, is like the service worker. And we're starting to see service worker kind of adoption in terms of the platform pieces come together. So Firefox, Opera, Chrome, and Samsung Internet are kind of the ones that everyone knows about, who have got, especially on mobile, who have got good service worker support, but also kind of the more traditional, I want to say Indian Chinese browsers, whether it's UC or Baidu or 360, are starting to get service worker support as well and improving their kind of platforms. And we've got WebKit, who are developing service worker for WebKit. We don't know whether it's going to land in Safari. I mean, it's a different question, but it's getting developed inside WebKit at least. And then we've got Eich. I think Patrick might be able to talk about this a little bit later. Eich developing a service worker. So, and kind of, we're pretty hopeful in terms of the state of the ecosystem, in terms of kind of the core technology for delivering these next generation web experiences. So we're pretty hopeful on that side of things. But the thing that we've been trying to work on is we know it's not easy to develop these experiences. So we've been working on a tool called Workbox, which is led by Adi Osmani and kind of our group in Google there, where we want to take that kind of this code, which is your traditional kind of offline handler, and make it a lot more simpler. So this is I think this is a stale wash revalidate pattern that we've got in here. And like the thing about service worker is that you can control the network, which is good. But it adds a lot of complexity into the way that you build applications. So we want to kind of change that, give developers the tooling if they want and if they need it, to replace that with just a single line of configuration or a single line of code. So we've been making a lot of kind of investments as a DevRel and as a Chrome team in kind of smoothing out that tooling part of the ecosystem. And I think that all leads into one of the bits that we're trying to kind of really get across to developers at the moment and businesses is that we've always pushed on this idea of performance is important, especially load performance. If you can't get the user into the experience, then it doesn't really matter if you've got like a super silky fast, 60 frames a second animation or kind of experience behind it. And we've never been quite clear about what it means to be a fast loading experience. And so we've tried to start to articulate what we think a fast load is, which is 5 seconds on a 3G network on a kind of medium device at the moment. So we're starting to kind of push a lot more in that space as well. But like once the whole point that we're trying to get to is that if you've got a experience which loads quickly on all devices, then that's cool and that's good for us and it's good for developers and it's good for users at that point. But kind of backtracking, if we don't have the tooling to get there, then we know that developers are never going to reach these goals. But I think the biggest thing that we've got is that we've never been clear about the goals. And I think within the last 6 months, we've started to get a lot clearer about what it means to be quick, I think, which is hopefully we're going to see a change in the industry on that side of things. We've also been kind of working a lot towards HTTPS. The hardest thing about this is that it's very hard to incentivize people to move to HTTPS. And so historically, there's been a slow movement in getting kind of sites on HTTPS. The Chrome team have been tracking that, and it's all been basically, everything changed since Let's Encrypt came out, pretty much. But like the thing is, things are changing. In the past 2 years, we've seen kind of a massive uptick in, at least on the Android side of things, of sessions in Chrome, which are over HTTPS based or secure connections at this point. So we're kind of kind of pretty happy, but this is one of those things where we're trying to push service worker adoption. We're trying to get more and more developers to build resilient applications, but they need HTTPS as the fundamental piece of technology under the hood. So things are changing. We're kind of happy with where that's going. There's still a lot more to go on as well. But there are a number of other things that are starting to happen inside Chrome, at least as well, that kind of also impact the HTTPS story. One of them is we're starting to mark all forms that manage data that are on HTTP as insecure. So all sites are as insecure. Originally, we just used passwords and credit card numbers. If we could detect a credit card number, we would say that the form was insecure over HTTP. We're going to be extending that to all forms as soon. And the idea there is to kind of let the users know that, if you're starting to push data across the web, that it's not encrypted by default, then it's not good for users at this point. So we're working on that. But like a lot of the technologies under the hood and a lot of the things that we're working on are also gated off the fact that we need HTTPS adoption to increase as well. So add to home screen needs HTTPS, service worker needs HTTPS, forms will need HTTPS, geolocation, all these advanced APIs, they need to at least be over a transport that has, in theory, been harder to intercept than non-HTTP-based systems. So we've been doing that. One of those things that we're working on, again, because given its forms, which are impacted by this, is that we're also working on improving autofill as well. So the idea is that once we know that users are a little bit more secure, at least, then we can help to optimize the kind of the flow of the user through a form. So we've been doing a lot of work about making sure that form fields are autofilled a lot more effectively. We can collect a lot more information and then kind of apply that to any form on the web, that side of things. It's a hard one. Developers need to change. Chrome has got some heuristics which it's doing to improve and guess what data should be in a field. But there are kind of attributes that developers and users or developers can use at this point. But once we've got forms and we've got those, we actually want to try and get rid of some of the forms as well. And there's two areas where we're trying to work on at the moment, which is payments and sign-in, where we know there's a huge amount of friction. So we've got payment request API, which I think is actually pretty broadly supported across quite a few browsers now. I think it's definitely in Edge, it's in Samsung Internet. I'm pretty sure it's in Mozilla Firefox as well. But the idea is that the payment, you can basically ask for the information that the browser has, the credit card information, delivery address, shipping address, billing address, and those types of things, and have those fields auto-filled. And we're starting to see a number of different developers starting to adopt this more broadly as well. So we've been pushing kind of payment requests. We're still going to be working on payment requests because we know that's a high point of friction on the web, and we want to improve that. But we've also kind of seen third-party ecosystem providers like Stripe as well start to integrate payment request API into their tooling. So if you use Stripe, in theory, you should just be able to automatically start to get these kind of platform benefits just integrated straight into your checkout experience. There is another one which is a little bit more kind of Google-centric. You can also integrate things like the Google Payment API, which I think was formerly known as Android Pay. You can start to integrate that into your web applications as well if you want. So there's more kind of some deeper integrations into the Google ecosystem as well. But it's all built off the payment request platform piece that, under the hood, which is good. And the same happens for sign up and sign in. We know that users, either forget their passwords or don't log in properly, or kind of they want to use a system kind of credential management tool. We've got an API called Credential Management, which allows you to synchronize your username and password across devices and across kind of the broader Google ecosystem. And there's an API that we've built on top of that. It's basically like a shim at this point, but that you can hook into a sign up and sign in improvements as well through Google. So I think that's actually pretty interesting. We're going to be doing, again, more work on this because we know it's actually hard to get a user into an application or a site. So we want to try and improve those experiences for everyone. I think some of the things that we've seen as well is we've seen a lot of work in the media space. So we've been doing a lot of work on all the different media APIs. And I'm going to try and go as quickly as possible through this because we see in India, India is a good example, huge amounts of actually media consumption is happening in India over what everyone roughly knows as relatively poor connections and low kind of capability devices. So we've been making a lot of improvements to the media stack. And a lot of this kind of comes through you expect the media playback on the web to be every single place that you expect a native, whether it's a native app or a native experience to be. So things like the media session API on the home screen on your watch, and also things like picture-in-picture. Your websites should just be able to kind of get access to this capability straight away. So we've been making a huge amount of improvements in that space and trying to improve them again as well. We've also tried to improve kind of the ability to, like, the consumption side of media. We've been making a lot of efforts to actually improve the media creation side of things as well. So we've got a better image picker. So like if you do input type equals file, you'll now get and accepts images. You'll now get this kind of new gallery picker, which is actually pretty nice, better than the old kind of file picker that you used to get, but you can still get to that if you need to. But if you want integrated real-time media control, then we've got the media stream and image capture APIs where you can start to manipulate and control the camera as well at that point, which is something we've kind of half had access to through Get User Media. But there's a newer API that's come through on the platform, which is basically allowing you to control your images, control the actual camera more effectively at this point. And then when you combine them all together, then I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, you start to get the kind of the Instagram kind of style experience where you can take full frame, full image captures from the camera, and then you can play them back and kind of manage them effectively. You can stream them up to the cloud, you can then kind of consume them, and then you can do adaptive bitrate control to actually do kind of playback irrespective of network type, which actually works pretty well. Once you've kind of, it's a hard kind of thing, but like the idea behind this is that once you've got an image and you've kind of uploaded it to a site, you might want to share it out to different applications or across the ecosystem as well. So we've been working on the Web Share API, and then I want to talk briefly about the Web Target API as well, but we haven't actually shipped any of that just yet, so it's a bit harder. But the idea behind this is that it's really hard for sites to integrate kind of inter-app communication between different websites and different apps at this point. We're solving the kind of the website to native app communication through the Web Share API. It's just a navigator.share with some kind of extra data on the side. And this is shipped already inside Chrome, so you can integrate with any native application and any native intent, share intent. The goal is to have any website also be able to kind of participate in that ecosystem. So we're working on the Web Share Target API, which allows your site to be in that kind of native picker. It's going to take a little bit longer to get out there, but we're starting to work on that. We've also worked a lot on kind of native notifications. Like Chrome always managed its own notifications. Developers hated it, users hated it. We're fixing it so that across every single platform, we're going to use the native notification provider. At that point, we're doing a lot more to try and connect experiences to different devices as well. So we're working on the presentation API as well, so that you can kind of cast to a screen and then kind of control the thing on the screen just through normal JavaScript. And we're also doing a lot more with interconnectivity across devices. So we've got a web Bluetooth API, which allows you to actually connect to different devices locally without kind of any kind of intermediate server, which is nice. And then also we're kind of pushing on the idea of integrating with web USB as well, or USB. So if you have an Android device, you can connect to your Android device if it's plugged in, and then you can control it through ADB if you want to do, and the user is given permission for it. It's a powerful API. And there's a lot more things kind of coming through, but the idea there is that we're trying to increase the capability of the web holistically and kind of bring users closer to the device. And I'm going to go pretty quickly. We have a platform called Custom Tabs. Now, Chrome custom tabs are like this thing that pops over a normal URL, normal screen, a browser screen, which the idea behind it is that you can have your native application. You click on a link, and it, rather than have to control web view, it comes up with like the Chrome browser, but with a URL bar that you can't edit. It's kind of nice, but if you own the URL and you own the experience, then you want a little bit more control. So we've got this idea of a thing called Trusted Web Activities, which allows you to build full screen, websites as applications. At this point, it's an Android native application that has a full screen renderer, which is Chrome, and you can do kind of pretty much whatever you want with it. Some of the nice things are it takes the idea from Chrome custom tabs code and management. So if you've used custom tabs, you'll be able to work out how to use Trusted Web Activities as well. But it allows you, to integrate with things like Google Play subscription services. It allows you to more deeply integrate with the Android system as well. So like when you have add to home screen, you can do the kind of like adaptive icons and a whole bunch of other stuff with that. So it's pretty nice. And then we're also working on this idea of desktop progressive web applications where they're installable and usable on the system like a native application would be. That's late 2018. We think there's going to be something around that, but we're just working on that. I realize that I'm actually quite over time at the moment, and I've got a little bit more to go through. I can stop it there if that makes sense, because like a lot of the other stuff is like things like Chrome Dev Tools improvements and a bunch of other stuff.
So excited! Are you going to be having? Do you have a full? Is there a full version of this?
Yeah, there's a full version. I can put it up live as well. I just realized that with the timer, I'm 3 minutes over or 4 minutes over already.
Yeah,
a little bit more.
you're fine. No, thank you so much for doing that. I know there's a bunch of questions and on the chat and things like that, so we'll definitely get to those. For those of you watching, feel free to open up the chat and start asking the different questions, and then we'll be getting into really awesome discussion soon. So very cool. I think next, thank you again so much, Paul. You can follow Paul on Twitter, by the way, at Paul_Kinlan. And next up, we are going to have Brendan from Brave give us a State of Brave update. I think you are muted, Brendan. Perhaps on purpose.
I'm always muted, sorry.
No worries, not at all.
I'm screen sharing now, so I hope everybody can see this. I'm going to go fast through some of this. Some of this you may have seen last time. So I think since last time at Brave, we did something that shows we're trying to be a deeper platform than just a browser. The browser is kind of the first tip of the spear, the first front end, the first client, and there may be other clients. So we did something called the basic attention token. Here's a little timeline of my career. I'm old, sorry. But I think what this shows, among other things besides nice logos, is sort of the progression up the stack and to peer-to-peer networks, which used to be like 15 or 18 years ago for file sharing, and now are interestingly being used for cryptocurrencies and blockchain-based, I would call them proof systems or sort of higher-level systems for being sure of certain facts among a large number of people. Brave's pitch to users as a browser, the tip of our spear, is that we stab ads and trackers. There's a confusion in the media about ads versus trackers. You hear a lot of talk about ad appearances, but the full totality of tracking is what costs users maybe 5 seconds on average on mobile page load. It's worse on a lot of sites. The variance is high. Part of this is JavaScript. I'm done with, I paid my dues. It's a 22-year-old child that I've kicked out of the house, but it is being used heavily for tracking in order to do things like place ads, also for other reasons, not good ones. And not to say all ads are good, but I can think of worse uses for tracking than ads. And you see it's being overused, and as things move to mobile since the iPhone, it seems like it got heavily overused on mobile sites. Some of what Paul said about PWAs helps with the first-party content, but if there's a temptation to integrate trackers and third parties, the tags that load from these domains you've never gone to as a person yourself, then it's going to be still a problem in the future. Because people want to cover their costs if they're putting up a website. They need to figure out a way to monetize. And getting people to subscribe is cool if you can do that, but it requires getting the user to make a sort of critical decision about giving a credit card information or giving PayPal information or doing something that requires a lot of trust. So users don't do it. Advertising is still a huge method for funding web content. And yet, there's a number here in the middle of this slide, $23 a month from Rob Leathern, now at Facebook, based on a New York Times study that shows that if you're on a sort of a tiered data plan, maybe half your data bill is trackers and ads. And Rob actually said mobile operators may be making more off of that data plan business than the publishers make in the little revenue share they get at the end of the ad pipeline, which goes through a lot of the intermediaries who take their cut of revenue. So there's something wrong about the system. It's an evolved system. It started with images in 93, cookies in 94, JavaScript in 95, and it just grew organically and opportunistically, and it's become a system that I think a lot of people are bothered by. So Brave is for the users who want to take control of their own destiny, especially their data, certainly their experience. They can get a much faster, safer experience. They can block all this tracking that you see on this slide that afflicts a particular media site. In Brave, the right-hand tracking graph is a mock-up because we don't have Ghostery integrated, but we do block almost every third party there. We block not Google fonts. They're good. As far as we know, not used for tracking. And the reason we do this is not just to improve the performance and reduce the data cost and reduce the radio drain on the battery, which extends your battery life on mobile. We do this to protect you from malware, which is getting into ad exchanges, which are very, very loose in how they admit vendors. And they also have problems of fraud on the other side, where they let fake sites and fake users steal ad revenue. We block by default. That's unusual. I think UC browser was the first to do that at scale. The big browsers in the West do not block by default. So there's an integrated solution that Brave offers to try to get users. And we have a little set of metrics we show, which people have put a Tumblr up of their own Brave stats. That's the number of trackers blocked, number of ads blocked. We also upgrade HTTP connections that go through misspelled links that downgrade them to HTTP from HTTPS. We upgrade them to HTTPS where the server is ready and should have had a content management system that made the link use the right prefix. And a surprising number of connections are upgraded that way. There's just a lot of misspelled links still out there. So this is like a client fix-up that we do in Brave. It's based on the HTTPS Everywhere extension. And there's an estimate of time saved. bravestats.tumblr.com. Check it out. But we're looking at the whole ecosystem. We take an ecological approach because we know publishers do need ad revenue mostly to get paid. If they can get subscribers, that's awesome. If we can find better ways to get payments for content, and we do, then we'll work on that. But we think ads matter. And this digital advertising system is full of companies you've never heard of, along with some big ones you have, who take a lot of the revenue out. And they let fraud through, as I mentioned, and they generally don't deliver value to users or publishers. So users have reacted by blocking. And this is not just with UC browser in Asia, but getting extensions. The big extensions, it turns out, whitelist ads for a fee. It's unclear exactly how this works. They're kind of black boxes, but it's rumored to be a big revenue source for some of the biggest ad blockers. It's kind of a conflict between their users and their business model, something we want to avoid at Brave. Nevertheless, ad blocking adoption is rising. It's rising linearly in the West, I hear. It's still rising. It's not going away. So we created a crypto token. This is like a unit of account at first. It exchanges now, so you can exchange it with Bitcoin. You can eventually exchange it to money. But it really is for tracking user attention and rewarding users for their attention, rewarding publishers based on user attention, and getting rid of all the ad fraud, the viewability fraud you may have heard about, where ads will claim credit when they aren't even visible, or they're below the fold, or they're covered up by something else. We do something that is intentional. We blind ourselves to user data. This is something Cory Doctorow talks about as the Ulysses Pact. He uses the Latin name for Odysseus. Odysseus wanted to hear the sirens sing, but he knew that they would lure him to his doom, so he had his men lash him to the mast and plug their ears with wax so he could hear the sirens sing but not be corrupted. And we do the same thing. We use zero-knowledge proofs. We use client-side encryption for data that's synchronized to servers. And we avoid seeing any user data on our servers. We don't want the burden of that. We don't want to see anything about you. And it's a clean story. I think it's good for, as we grow, it puts all the burden of adding value to the user on the browser. But the browser already has all your data, if you think about it. The browser is where you have a high degree of trust in where the secure connections terminate, and where data is cached, and where your history is saved, and you can clear it. So people already have to have a super high trust relationship with their browser. And we're building a data platform there. The first manifestation of this is this Brave Payments panel in our settings. You can use the basic attention token to fund a wallet that you own that by default trickles out over a 30-day period at the end of the 30 days to the sites you browse. You can, if you wish, pin donations to sites, whether you browse them or not, so that you make a percentage of your budget donation at the end of the month, end of the 30 days of personal uptime, I should say, to those sites. But if you just let this go after funding your wallet, it will just be steered by your browsing. And it's based on sort of chart beats like view count and time spent. We have had a large number of users engage with this over the course of a beta we did using Bitcoin over the last year and a couple of months. We had over 160,000 user wallets created. And now we're moving to the basic attention token, which has been available since last month. we don't wait for the publishers to register with us to make them visible. So we have a partner that can hold the funds in escrow for a long period of time, and then try to get the publishers to come on board asynchronously. This lets users just fund their wallet, see if their publishers come and get the funds that they've sprinkled around. If they don't, after a certain period of time, those funds go back into a user growth pool. One of the reasons we did the token sale was to create some tokens, not for sale, that float on the side of the sale that we can give out to users. And that's how we're initially going to stake users with tokens, so they don't even have to open their credit card to fund their wallet. They will get some from us, and that will allow them to start contributing. And this is just a contribution system. It's not for everybody, but we hope it can go bigger than similar systems like Blendle have gone, because it's so automatic. It's built into the browser. The cognitive cost is only once every 30 days. Once you are comfortable with it, you can just sort of let it go. And once you've set your pins, and you can adjust things on the 29th day to change who gets paid and how much they get paid. And again, the settlement with the publishers is independent. We have over 1,000 publishers onboarded and verified now, getting paid. And we're moving to support account holders on platforms like Twitch, YouTube. There'll be news on that soon. We look at the ad system, the way it evolved. It involves all this intermediation and ad exchanges that allow malware in. We get rid of that. We're moving on to a second phase in the new year, I hope in the first quarter, of offering users, again, opt-in, just like the contribution system. None of this is on unless you want it to be. Opt-in private ads that are shown to you in a private tab, we think, not against publisher content. There's a conflict of interest between advertisers and publishers. This is kind of primal. You hear about brand safety and ads being placed against bad content, and no controls through ad exchanges and reselling of ad slots, so that a good brand can see its ad degraded by being put against what they regard as bad content. That conflict is unnecessary. We think there should be a direct-to-the-user model. We see this in WeChat with its chatbot one-a-day offers. We're building something like this using the basic attention token, and we do it with high privacy. Instead of tracking the user, if the user opts into this, you get a catalog of possible ads. These are long-form, high-quality ads. They're the same catalog for everybody in a region who speaks a natural language, so there's no tracking through this catalog. And instead of having the tracking on the server side, the ad matching is done on the device in the Brave component that you opt into, based on local data, local machine learning. And this is not super heavy machine learning. This is tried and true techniques that don't drain your battery. So there's really no tracking on the front side to place these one-a-day or low-frequency, high-quality ads in a user private tab. And then to confirm them, we use the same zero-knowledge proofs we use for our payments that blind us to the user action. We don't actually know anything about the user, but we can nevertheless have authenticity through the zero-knowledge proofs and payment through the BAT. And if we get this stood up right and start getting ad deals, we will share 70% of the revenue with the user. The user is the publisher in this case. It's the user's inventory that the ad goes in. So the BAT is moving along. We're in phase 1. We have a way for users to contribute to their favorite sites. We're moving toward accounts as well on big platforms. Phase 2 will bring up user private ads. And phase 3, we hope to share the BAT with other platforms. We're already talking to a few clients, products, not just browsers, but think of podcast apps and things like that. I went pretty fast. I just want to say it's awesome to have Beaker here too. We're doing a donation to the nonprofit that supports some of the work that Beaker is doing. And we're trying to advance the web up a level from where it kind of stalled in the 90s. There's so much awesome work, like the work Paul talked about in APIs, and that will continue. But to me, the real challenge is to move the domain of discourse up from JavaScript and images to things like payments and trust relationships, affiliated domains that can be treated as a single app that don't have to be all same origin. And there's ongoing work there. I saw some of it at the W3C tag meeting the other week. But that work kind of stalled after IE took over the web back in 2000. And it's restarting, but to go up a level, sometimes you need some people to go further, faster, and not just incrementally improve what we have, but block things and then replace broken ecosystems with better ones. So that's what Brave's all about. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you so much, Brendan. That was really great. Super interesting. And I love that some of the folks on your team are answering questions and adding a little bit of flavor to what you shared with us. So next up, we are going to have Paul Frazee from Beaker. He's the co-creator of Beaker. And go ahead and give us a State of Beaker update. Very excited to hear what you have to say.
All right. Thank you very much. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Cool. All right, let me get my screen share going here. Okay, slides coming up?
Yep.
All right. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. This is really fun. I'm going to be talking about Beaker. I know probably a lot of the audience, this is your first time ever hearing about Beaker, so this will be a little introduction for you. Beaker is a really experimental sort of community project. It's an open source fork of Chrome. We made it because we wanted to see if we could push the web platform in some kind of interesting and new directions. And in particular, we want to push back towards what we see as the original vision for the web, which was to be open and decentralized and a commons where people can participate and publish without having to ask permission from anybody. And the way we see it, the web works right now, with a lot of major providers that act as the gatekeepers for a lot of publishing. So we use Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and all these big providers to run most of the web. Now, the reason we think it's become this way is because we depend on servers so much. When the web was first created, maybe using a server wasn't a big deal because they were pretty simple, but over time, we've added a lot of advanced behaviors to the applications of the web. That's caused the servers to become very complex. You have to have a lot of expertise and money to run these servers. And so that has led us to this point where, excuse me, I'm sorry about that. It's led us to this point where we depend on these servers to do our publishing, and we don't have as much independent publishing on the web. So we are asking with the Beaker browser, would it be possible for us to move the code and the publishing process and the browsing process and all the mechanics for the web, could we move them off of the servers and onto the user's devices directly? Still maintain everything that we love about the web, but just not have to depend on these servers for everything. And so that idea is what has driven a lot of the development we've done. And if we are successful at this, then we might be able to have a lot more independent control over the applications we use. So let's talk about why. Well, the first reason that gets me really motivated is the ability to edit software. A lot of the application code lives up in the server where as a user I can't touch it. So I can't jump onto Twitter, for instance, and start changing up the code. We have things like extensions, but they're really pretty brittle. You can just inject JavaScript into the page, so you can't change any of the really core business logic that runs the application. And I'm a programmer. I want to be able to, edit my applications that I use. I want to have open source apps. So if we can actually move the code off of the servers and onto the user's devices, we make it possible for users to start to customize their web applications directly and solve their own needs. So we get a much more open source web if we're using devices instead of servers. Really complementary to that is data ownership. We put all of our data up on servers right now where we don't have control over it. So I can't take my Facebook profile, for instance, and copy it over to some server I own and still interact with people on Facebook, right? Because Facebook is a closed system. So by moving the data management onto user devices, we are putting a lot more control into users' hands because they can take their data from one application and put it in another application and not lose their experience overall. So putting the code and the data onto the user devices. Now, the last bit is privacy. This is, I think, really important to address. We want to get away from the system we have now where your files and your private messages that you're sending, they're going through these third-party services. And when they're on those services, they're going in plain text. So we don't have any privacy from the people that are running these applications, and we think there's maybe some moral hazard to that, and it might be eroding the trust in our industry. So if we could get much better end-to-end secrecy on the web, that would be a big improvement. So this has all led us to a peer-to-peer architecture for running web applications and websites. We still browse traditional HTTPS in Beaker, but we've added these new peer-to-peer techs. One way you could describe it is to say that we're getting rid of servers. So you could look at it that way, but I think actually it's more interesting to say that we're making it really easy for any device to become a server. So your mobile device or a laptop or a computer up in the cloud, all of them can join into this peer-to-peer network, and they can serve websites. And in fact, they can serve as many as they want. You can have hundreds of websites being served off of your laptop, which is really nice. On top of that, there's a bandwidth sharing mechanism built into the protocol we use, which helps keep costs very low, which is important for independent publishing. The protocol we're using, this is what Brendan mentioned recently. They've graciously decided to donate to the project. It's the DAT project. This is a nonprofit called Code for Science that runs the DAT project. They're a really great group of people. Check out their website there, datproject.org. That is the one protocol that we have integrated into Beaker. And it is a lot like BitTorrent, actually, but it improves on BitTorrent in some really important ways for what we're doing. It adds the ability to change data over time. It adds versioning to the protocol. It adds really good, fast random access over the network. So almost everything that I'm going to be talking about is built on top of DAT. There are some pretty cool features we were able to put in without a lot of effort just by adding in DAT as a browsing protocol. The first is that we have one-click publishing. So just from a menu inside of the browser, you can open up, hit new site, and just like that, you've got a new site. That just allocates a new key pair for you. That creates a global address. And then you can share that address, and you have a new website. Really good for sharing files, good for sharing video and audio, or static websites. So really reduces the barrier to participating, no needing to sign up or anything like that. Really nice feature. Bandwidth sharing is a really big part of this. Like I said, it's like BitTorrent. So whenever you download files off the network, you actually talk to lots of different peers on the network that have the files, and you download pieces from everybody. And then once you have downloaded the files, you will rehost them for a small period. But if you want, you can open up this menu here and say, you know what, I want to give back to this site, so I'm going to rehost it for a week or a month or forever. Now, first of all, that's just kind of cool. It's really neat that you can go to a website and be like, you know, I like what they're doing. I want to give back. And so you can just press a button to give back some resources that you have. But it's also actually really important for this entire concept to work that we have bandwidth sharing. Because if an independent creator were to put out a video, for instance, and that video were to get really popular, go viral or something like that, the amount of bandwidth that could be hitting their home device would be too much. And it would cause the network to fall down. So by having bandwidth sharing built into the protocol actually scales up automatically to deal with demand. And that's a really important part of keeping the cost low for the content creators and actually just making sure that resources can be served. DAT is a offline first protocol. This is a really good direction to go for the web, so it can both read and write without having an internet connection. That means you can save a website for offline. It'll work just fine. Writing is the really interesting thing. If you own the website, you don't need an internet connection to be changing the files inside of it, so you can do work whether or not you're, maybe if you're in a rural area or if you're traveling, it doesn't stop you from doing any work. DAT also works over the Wi-Fi, so you can connect to somebody on the LAN. You don't need an internet connection to synchronize data between two computers. Live reloading is a cool little feature we were able to put in because the DAT protocol, you can actually sit and watch the swarm for updates to a site. It doesn't cost a lot to do that in terms of bandwidth. So we have a feature you can just turn on live reloading and the page will automatically refresh when a change happens, which is really cool for development flows. Like I said, DAT is versioned, so you can actually go back in time to see old versions of a site. That is really, really important for, I think, applications and also code modules. So we can start to do some of the tasks that we put to package managers could actually be natively built into the web. And again, this is really important for code because you need to be able to ask for specific versions of code to make sure that you're not breaking compatibility. So versioning is a really awesome feature to have in here. Finally, my favorite feature is forking. You can go to any of these DAT websites and open up a menu and just say, I'd like to fork this site, just like on GitHub, where you're going to copy all the files into a new site that you own. And then you can just begin to make changes and customize it however you like. So that's really getting down to the core idea that we have of a user-editable web. So what I've been talking about so far is largely file sharing and static websites, which is really cool, but it's also kind of like Web 1.0, right? What we want to have is really dynamic behaviors. We want to run entire applications. And so to do that, we need to be able to replace the entire backend with peer-to-peer APIs. And that's where the things get particularly challenging, is where we're probably going to be working as a project for the next couple of years. So we have a couple of pieces that are done, a couple of pieces that we're working on. I'll talk about just a couple things. The first tool that we have is a web API for DAT. So you can browse DAT, and in addition to that, you can use this API to read and write the files within it. So any website could potentially create a new DAT. You can read the directory, file listing. You can read files, write files. You can create activity streams, so you can watch for changes to files, which is a really important feature. And you can also examine the history. Now, this tool set is actually really powerful. Almost everything that we're building for backend management at this point is just built on top of these DAT files API. So right from the get-go, we were able to make some cool little demos, like a paste bin replacement and a photo albums app, made a DAT RSS reader, which is really cool. And then some of our users that were particularly enterprising decided to create a Twitter clone, which they call Rotund. And this is a really neat app. Basically, what they did is they gave every user in the network their own website. And on that website, they put a single JSON file, which is the portal.json. And this is how they decided to do it. They just wrote all the data into that JSON file. So user profile, who they follow, all their status updates, just in this JSON. And then they follow each other's websites, which is almost kind of like an indie web thing, where all these different websites synchronizing together and working together, almost like federation, but it's just peer-to-peer, right?
Web ring.
Yeah, exactly. So and the way that they decided to create the startup flow is really cool too. You would go to the creator's profile site, his version of Rotund, and you would just fork it. And then you would change your name. And what that caused is everybody to have their own editable version of Rotund. So each of the users would then start to customize their instance with new UIs and new CSS changes and things like that, which is kind of like old school MySpace, but even cooler, because all of the code was right there too. So people were able to create their own UIs, and that's made for a really kind of vibrant community of people trying out new things and adding features. So it's really exciting. It's totally what we wanted to see happen with that. So that's roughly where we're at right now. The thing that we have been working on lately, there's actually a couple of things we're working on, but I'm just going to talk about WebDB. The file system API is really powerful, but it also lacks a couple of key features. The biggest one being that it's hard to run queries. So for instance, if I'm using Rotund as a developer, I might want to say, give me all the users named Bob, or give me the last 10 status updates that have been posted, things like that. And if you're using just the files API, you're going to have to index all that data yourself and come up with ways to run those queries. We decided to just go ahead and solve that for everybody once. So we created an indexing crawler called WebDB, which will scan across these DAT sites looking for JSON files and put them into an index so that you can run queries in a really efficient way. So you're still using the files API, but it feels as a developer like you're using a database. So if you look at that diagram there, you can see it illustrated. We have these 3 DAT sites on the right. And the WebDB looks at one of the websites and sees, okay, there's some JSON files in the posts folder. It goes ahead and slurps them up and indexes them into a posts table. And that's what we got all the way on the left. And that gives you a nice API where you can think as a database. So to give me all the posts from yesterday to a week ago, things like that. So we are building the tool set for creating custom indexes. And then for a really, really approachable developer experience, we're actually building in some of those indexes and some of those data schemas, which is what you see at the top there, WebDB.profiles and posts and events. Basically, we think we can create an ontology, this pre-made library of data types, so that a new developer can sit down and start cranking out new applications without having to learn anything at all about how WebDB works. It's just, oh, cool, I can make status updates and photo albums and things like that. So that's where we're at with Beaker. We have a working version you can download, beakerbrowser.com, version 07. It's still kind of in the proof of concepts phase, so you're going to have to dig a little bit to find out what's going on. But we're working right now on a new version, 08, which we're hoping will make it really usable and approachable for somebody that's new. If you want to just sit down and be like, hey, I want to play with a peer-to-peer app, we think maybe 08 will start to be something that a new, less technically minded user could jump in and start to have fun. So yeah, check us out, beakerbrowser.com, and on Twitter.
Thank you so much, Paul. Paul and Brendan, it's very exciting to see the community around that you guys are working on develop, and they're very active online. So I'm loving seeing everybody chatting on the live chat and also on Twitter. Next up, we are going to have Josh Marinacci, who is going to be giving us a state of Firefox. And you guys have your big launch today, correct?
We do. Firefox Quantum, which is mainly what I'll be talking about. Let's get... And of course, there's one embarrassing detail, which is I'm actually using Chrome to show you because for some reason, Hangouts will not work with Firefox. I guess it used to work with the old plugins, and they haven't updated the Hangouts code to work with all the new WebRTC stuff. So, but rest assured, I use Firefox nightly, all the time. We suffer the bugs, so you don't have to. OK, let's see. Everyone see my screen? Yep, good. So Firefox update, this is November. I actually went through, well, first I explain who I am. Potch was going to be here, but he's double and triple booked because of all the launch activities today. So he asked me to fill in for him. I just joined Mozilla Developer Relations about 3 or 4 months ago. So if I miss a few things, I will put you in touch with the right people. And I apologize if I miss someone's favorite feature. You can find me on Twitter at Josh Marinacci. My Mozilla email has my last name, which no one can spell. So I just started going by me at josh.earth. Then you'll always know where I am. And by the way, if you like this background art, one of our talented graphic designers created this. Just tweet me or email me, and I'll give you links to all the. These are super high resolution desktop backgrounds. I love his art style. OK, Firefox Quantum is the giant news. This is one of Lynn Clark's diagrams illustrating what we've been working on. So Firefox had kind of fallen behind in the browser battle, and the company had been working on some other projects. And the last 2 years has really been focused on making desktop Firefox a quality first-tier browser again. And so we started this Quantum initiative, which is to incrementally replace portions of the browser rather than write the whole browser again from scratch, because we all know second system effect, that never works. So some of these pieces have been completed, and a bunch is dropping today in what we're calling Firefox Quantum, which is Firefox 57. That doesn't mean the Quantum project is over. Over the next year to 18 months, you're going to see more of this stuff happen. The important things, Quantum Compositor is where we started splitting out pages from each other and put the actual compositor, the part that draws all the stack and images together, actually draws on the screen, put that in a separate process. So it's more stable. If there's a graphics bug, then the graphics driver crashes and it just restarts. It doesn't crash the whole browser. We started doing a lot more with fine-grained parallelism, and that's thanks to Rust. So Rust, if you don't know, Rust is a new programming language created at Mozilla, which is designed to kind of go to basically be a better C++. It is C compatible, so you can write a library in it, and the rest of your code will think it's just C code. But it is very safe. It's pretty much impossible to have buffer overruns. It's very thread safe. And so it's the perfect way of writing tricky threaded code. And so the Quantum DOM is parallelizing a lot of the internal DOM work. Stylo, I believe, came out, I don't know if it's this release or the previous one, but it's a new CSS parser written in Rust, which came out of our Rust servo work. And it is both basically crash-proof. We're not going to be able to have any more buffer overruns, and it's multi-threaded, so you can use the multiple cores on your browser, on your desktop. And Quantum Flow is really what we call our performance strike force. This is a team of people whose job is to constantly monitor performance, measure any regressions. When we come up with a new idea, like maybe we should, will the Quantum Compositor actually make everything faster and more efficient? Well, they can give us real data. For a long time, we were kind of shying away from data, and that has changed. We want to make decisions based on what will actually work and give us good data. Quantum render parts of it are there, but it's not completely there yet. And the idea with quantum render is that we are going to make the GPU do more and more of the work, since GPUs are super powerful and multi-threaded. So since this was kind of grew out of the idea of, if you could build a web browser from scratch today, given modern devices, how would you do things differently? All devices have multiple cores. All devices have GPUs. Getting data into the GPU is the bottleneck rather than the actual drawing. And so it turns out a modern web browser should look a lot more like a game engine, where we focus on filling up these textures and let the GPU do what it's really good at. And so that's what quantum render is about. And again, we built that as this thing called web render, if you've heard it, from the Servo project. And our goal is to get that pulled into Firefox Core as well over the next year. Now, along with that, Firefox 57, we've deprecated and removed the old add-ons API, switching to web extensions. So it's compatible with web extensions from other browsers. We've worked really hard to get all of the major ones updated, but it will warn you if there's a legacy extension that it can't run anymore. But most people shouldn't notice the difference. It should just run well. You can now turn on tracking protection by default. We started playing with a few new things on mobile. There's a new app called Firefox Focus for iOS, and I think we've shipped it for Android now, which is essentially a slimmed down browser that always browses in private mode. My idea is, I want to do something. I want to focus on what I'm reading. I don't want any extra distractions. I don't want my bookmarks. I don't want my news feeds. Just let me focus on what we're doing. And it was kind of an interesting bet. We weren't sure if this would actually resonate with people, but it's been surprisingly popular. And of course, we do a lot of work with the standards bodies. WebAssembly is finally taking off. And I've seen more and more libraries rewriting themselves in WebAssembly. And CSS Grid is everywhere now, which was not the case just 6 months ago. So the web has really, like the last 6 to 9 months, a lot of really wonderful stuff has happened. And as I said, Firefox Quantum is really just the beginning. There's more stuff coming over the next 12 months. So if you want to learn more about how we got to where we are today, go to hacks.mozilla.org. Lynn, who does these amazing illustrations here, just posted a new blog describing all the different pieces and how they fit together. And it's actually a really fascinating story. And I love her illustrations. OK, so so I'm developer relations, but I'm specifically working with our mixed reality team. And this is what I'm personally really excited about. This is virtual reality on the web, and coming soon, augmented reality. I feel like the web has often been playing catch up with native APIs, and we didn't want that to be the case this time. We want, the VR and AR space is really heating up, and it's changing all the time. We want the web to be a part of that conversation, so we cannot just mimic what the native guys are doing, but actually push forward and set standards that will benefit everybody. So we shipped the WebVR 1.0 in Windows this past summer. I think it was in August. And we have Mac and Linux versions in beta. It works with the Oculus, the HTC Vive. I believe we work now with the new Windows headsets that shipped like a week or two ago. If not, it's in nightly and coming soon. And of course, we've long worked with Cardboard and Gear VR through some polyfills. And there's more of this stuff coming as these vendors have created new, like I got a Vive a couple of weeks ago, and it's already massively out of date. Like the stuff that's coming in the next 12 months is going to blow away the old systems. You won't need those huge, you won't have to have all the sensor bars everywhere. You're just going to put something on your head and you're going to be in VR. And another nice thing is that all the quantum work that we've been doing has specifically helped VR to be not just faster, but smoother. It's not just a matter of hitting 90 frames per second. And it means the jitter between, one frame is a little longer, one's a little bit shorter. You really want to keep them very consistent. And when you're doing virtual reality, that matters far more than on a desktop. So it was kind of not so noticeable to us because we're using nightly and the stuff has come in incrementally. But one of my coworkers did a test of VR today versus 6 months ago, and when you stack up all those little improvements, it's really dramatic. It's wonderful. So that's VR. We're in the WebVR working group, of course, with our fellow browser makers. And the next thing is we really want augmented reality to be a part. And we created this thing called WebXR, currently X, just because we didn't know what to call it. It's a spec and a polyfill that we've got on GitHub for doing augmented reality on your phone and to a certain extent on the desktop. And we created an XR viewer app for iOS, which if Apple ever approves it, will be in the App Store. And our idea is that we want to expose native functionality. Apple recently shipped ARKit, Google shipped AR Core, and device support is continuing to grow. So we want, these devices have highly optimized pipelines for doing vision detection and marker detection and looking at the space around it. So we just want to expose that to the web, and that's what the WebXR spec is about. And this is just a proposed spec. It's constantly changing, but we want to do it in the open, so everything's on GitHub. If this video plays, let's see, how do I get, video? There we go, come on. All right, this is a demo application I put together where I'm walking around my extremely messy living room because I have a 6-year-old who loves his Legos. And I'm building a virtual Lego wall. You tap a block and these phantom blocks pop up and you tap which one you want to turn real. And it's fully 3-dimensional, so I can walk around it. I can start building up and down. And of course, I haven't done this yet, but the next step is clearly I need to have a ball that I can throw at it and make everything knock apart and fall into a zillion pieces, because that would be awesome. So this is just a little taste of what's going to be possible with WebXR. And this is basically bog standard 3JS code. There's very little that's XR specific. So another thing we've been doing is we realize there's a lot of programmers who are not 3D designers, and 3D designers are not programmers. So to help the designers, we've been working on A-Frame, which is a markup-based 3D scene engine, and we're going to be adding some augmented reality extensions to that. On the other side, we partnered with Sketchfab to do a design challenge, and lots of people, lots of talented 3D designers entered this challenge. I agreed to judge thinking that it would be like, oh, we got 10 or 20 people apply, and in the end we got, I think, 120. So I spent a lot of time looking through these 3D scenes, and many of them are just adorable, cute, medieval style, low poly. This is one of our winners here, was a medieval mine scene. And we are working on a new challenge which will have people take these assets, take them apart, and use them to create new things. So that will be coming soon. And of course, since today is Firefox Quantum, we are starting some new advertising campaign. Excuse me, still recovering from the cold. Many people don't really know what Mozilla does. They know the name, but they don't know much about us, and they don't know that Mozilla is a nonprofit. So we're starting a new advertising campaign, Fast for Good, that you may start seeing on billboards and newspapers and potentially even TV. So that is exciting stuff. So what's coming up over the next 6 months? We want to get A-Frame 1.0 shipped. It's got new support for GLTF, which is essentially a file format for 3D objects on the web, and updating it to work with WebGL2, which is higher performance and enables new special effects. We're also pushing forward on multi-view. Multi-view is a way of sharing. So currently, if you do 3D rendering, like a stereo rendering, you're essentially rendering the whole scene 100% twice, once for your left eye, once for your right. And the idea behind multi-view is that we'll be able to share some of the work between the two eye renders, which will basically give you a 30 to 40% speed up for free. DOM to texture, this should really be DOM to texture. DOM to texture is letting the 2D and 3D worlds mix together more easily and more efficiently. Pathfinder is a new GPU-based font rasterizer, so that when you're in the VR world, you can still have attractive-looking text that zooms in properly. It's not just a texture that gets pixelated when you get close to it. And we are working with the W3C committee to merge the VR and AR world. So right now there's WebVR 1 and I think 1.1 and proposals for WebVR 2. And then we have WebXR. And our goal is to smush all this together to maybe WebMR for mixed reality. So there's so much overlap between virtual reality and augmented reality, it really makes sense for them to be one spec. So in fact, today, I think later is our weekly meeting with the W3C committee. We have all of the browser makers there. So I think VR and AR on the web is going to be really exciting over the next 12 months. Plus, there's just so much amazing hardware coming out. It's going to be like, you'll look at your HTC Vive and say that's ancient Stone Age technology. So that's everything I got. If you have any questions, I'm on Twitter at Josh Marinacci, or just email me, josh.earth. And if you want some of this awesome background art, let me know. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Josh. That was really, really great to hear all the different updates. Love the AR, VR stuff. And it's exciting to see the CSS Grid and WASM everywhere, because I think the last time Posh was here, he was just talking about the integration of different things. So last but definitely not least, we have Patrick Kettner, who is going to be giving us an update on Microsoft Edge. And you guys have been doing some really cool stuff. So I'm super excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you very much. I realize we're a little bit behind time. Can you guys see my slides?
Yep, you're totally fine.
Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So this was originally a 2-hour presentation. I'm going to try and squeeze into as little time as possible. So I'm going to skip a whole bunch of stuff that, rather, there's a lot of stuff I'm not covering in here that we did have in our last release. But yeah, so my name is Patrick. I work on Microsoft Edge out in Redmond, Washington as a program manager. You can contact me in pretty much any social media that exists at Patrick Kettner. And we're going to break down what we're going to talk today into 4 different buckets: usability, web development features, performance, and security. So first of all, on usability, Edge being an application, we want to make sure that the end user's experience is as good as possible. So we're constantly trying to rethink how we do things. A great example of this is in our most recent release, we now have 2-way favorite syncing between Internet Explorer and Microsoft Edge. A lot of old websites, especially in the enterprise, haven't been updated for modern web standards and still rely on kind of the gross old stuff like ActiveX. As a result, sometimes people have to bounce in between multiple browsers, Internet Explorer and their browser of choice, in order to actually get work done. And so we introduced this ability to have favorite syncing. So this isn't just the normal import that you do when you set up a new browser. This is actually a 2-way sync. So when you add something in Edge, it goes into Internet Explorer and vice versa constantly over time and get stuff updated. Another fun one that was added was new reading modes. We added the ability to support EPUB, so the ebook formatting. It exists. We have a native EPUB renderer, so it works really great in a lot of education environments and stuff, and it can be a really handy way to keep up to date on your books. We also have the ability to kind of highlight, add notes, and do all kinds of interesting things within the textbooks or novels or whatever you end up reading over EPUB. In addition, if you purchase a EPUB through the Microsoft Store, you have the ability to kind of sync positioning across all your devices. So if you happen to have more than one, it can be a nice way to not have to constantly carry around your desktop or your laptop. Yeah, so there's a whole lot more usability, but we're going to jump into the more interesting stuff, at least for me, the web development features. There's a ton in our most recent update, the Fall Creators Update, which came out on October 17th. So just a few weeks ago. One of the most exciting is CSS Grid. We touched on it a bit before, but I just want to reiterate that this is something that's finally in all browsers. This is something that some of my teammates started working on years and years ago, almost 6 years ago now, 5.5, I think. And it's fantastic to see within the last year that it's now broadly supported in all browsers. And it really is the way forward for how to make CSS layouts. If you're unfamiliar, if you haven't started shipping code yourself, I really suggest you check it out. You can reduce a ton of your CSS layout code to almost nothing. Rachel Andrews, who's in our chat, has a phenomenal resource, gridbyexample.com. And she's just been a tireless advocate for how wonderful Grid is. And my team is forever grateful for all the work that she's done for it, because it really has been incredibly influential and great to see. Another one, service workers. So Paul from Google earlier mentioned that service worker support was in development in Microsoft Edge, and that is true. We've been working on it for nearly 2 years now. The most recent release actually shipped support for it behind a flag. So since it's a fundamental rethinking of the entire network stack, which goes back into the early 90s, we want to make sure that we get it right, and so we shipped it behind a flag in order to make sure that websites didn't break. And then this upcoming release, the one that's going to be happening a few months from now, will be enabling Service Worker by default, which means that nearly all major modern browsers will have it by default. And it's a super exciting thing to see. There's also a website which got pulled out of my slides accidentally called pwabuilder.com. It's a great way to sort of dip your toe into making your first PWA if you haven't before, and we can help you automatically add resources to your website in order to make it more PWA-like. I can add a link to that in the chat in a little bit. Another great thing that we're excited about is the payment request API, which Paul also mentioned. It's something that's been around in Edge for about 1.5 years now. Gives you a really streamlined way to do checkout processes. If they take any kind of money on the web, you'll know that it's really easy to lose users when you have to start filling out a form, especially if they're first time. So I'd highly suggest anybody that does take money on the web, check out the web payment API, because it's really, really a game changer. I come from an e-commerce background, so I'm super excited to see this starting to ship across the web. WebVR is obviously another thing. We just covered a whole bunch of it, so I don't have to go into too much detail other than the fact that it's incredibly exciting. We shipped support for WebVR 1.1 in our most recent release. We added a whole bunch of cool features like fine-grained control support, so you can have extremely fine-grained motion controller. So if you have 2 VR controllers, you can see exactly where your hands are in space, and it works really well. And there's tons and tons of other feature improvements, and we're extremely invested in the XR space that was just mentioned, and so it's something that my team is extremely excited about, and we really look forward to seeing how the space evolves. WASM support is another one that was really exciting. If you're unfamiliar, WASM is effectively a binary form of ASM. It's a simplification, but effectively you're able to start shipping cross-compiled code into the browser in extremely performant in an extremely performant way. And so you can do some really impressive stuff with this. Like, for example, Wikipedia.org only supports OGG Vorbis video and audio files, which unfortunately Microsoft Edge doesn't have a codec for. But they started shipping a decoder for OGG videos through JavaScript using WebAssembly and falling back to ASM, so if you go to the view a video or audio file on Wikipedia today in Microsoft Edge, you will actually get a JavaScript powered video or audio decoder. It's crazy, and you would never even notice. Like, the performance is just as good as a native one, so it's really, really cool to see. And WASM is supported pretty much across browser. There's tons of resources out there to learn more about it. It's really exciting. Another one that I'm super excited about is ES6 modules. So we are now shipping support, and I believe nearly everyone has support for this now. Excuse me, certainly in the next couple of months, but you'll be able to kind of finally have a modularized version of JavaScript files in the browser and be able to start shipping individual little pieces. Really, there's all these new things that kind of just fundamentally let us rethink how we write code. It's really exciting. Oh, there's that thing I talked about before, pwabuilder.com. That's if you want to check out Service Worker, Web App Manifest, or all the other fun integrations that are possible. In addition to all that stuff, we have a lot of changes to our dev tools. So a little bit of a history lesson. Microsoft Edge was like a ground-up rewrite of our entire application. It's not like built on IE, really. It's pretty much burning down most of that code base and then reusing almost none of it. Unfortunately, one of the things that was reused was our dev tools. From a time long ago in which they were acceptable, and unfortunately they really weren't. Because of a whole bunch of different reasons, they're effectively held together with chewing gum and duct tape, and they're not really that competitive compared with a lot of the other dev tool opportunities out there. And so we've been investing a lot of effort into rebuilding our developer tools. This is what the back end of our dev tools used to look like, which you don't really need to read all this other than to realize that this kind of sucks. Like, this is a really complex, gross way to build a lot of this stuff. And we've re-architected it effectively to be much more flat. So now we just have a single JSON RPC, so basic JSON API that gets communicated over WebSockets so that we can control directly from the Edge rendering process back to the DevTools. And that exact same API can be intercepted by VS Code, tools like Sonar or Google Lighthouse, Visual Studio, all these other really neat developer tools can intercept these things and control it. This is very similar to a Chrome's DevTool model, and something where we'll be having a lot of interoperability with Chrome's DevTools, so that if you're building a tool that builds on top of the Chrome DevTools protocol, it should work within Edge DevTools as well. Yeah. In addition to that, we're rewriting the code itself inside of it. So we're writing on top of TypeScript, React and Inferno, Webpack, and all these other really exciting new teams. Sean Larkin, the Webpack guru on Twitter, actually joined the developer tools team last year, or a few months ago rather. And he's doing a lot of really exciting stuff, and I'm really proud of all the work that they've been doing. They've done a whole bunch of performance improvements to where it's much faster and uses less disk space. And in addition, we've added a whole bunch of actual useful features to make debugging websites really, possible with it. So stuff like pseudo selectors, where you can actually go in and check the before and after, where previously you weren't able to check CSS pseudo selectors. You are able to group events by the type of them, so you can see you can look at all the events that are declared for an individual element within the HTML DOM Explorer. You can do all kinds of stuff like font inspection to see what the font that's actually being rendered is, animation keyframe support, media query support, just all kinds of stuff, or console logging styles, stuff that you actually need to get your work done. It's finally now supported within the F12 DevTools, so that you can actually fix bugs and make the web a better place. Not only that, we have a lot of investment into testing. The most exciting part of that is probably we have a partnership with browserstack.com, where you can sign up for a free account in order to test inside of Microsoft Edge. So if you happen to use a non-Windows 10 device, which is pretty common in the web development industry, you don't have to worry about having to download an entire virtual machine or completely ignoring the Windows 10 users of your product. You can sign up for a free device and look into automated testing using WebDriver in order to get some cool testing features. With performance, there's a couple of neat stuff. So one of the things we constantly do inside of the Edge application is try to look for ways in which we can speed up things. And one of the ways we do this is by moving stuff over to independent rendering threads. And so what that means is that we can take the chunk of time where we're currently, or where the browser wants to render all your code, we can move it to its individual thread so that it no longer blocks on that main UI thread, the JavaScript thread where all your stuff runs. That means you're able to get more stuff done in a smaller amount of time, and hopefully just results in a much more smooth experience for all of your users. The independent rendering shipped inside of Edge 16, this most recent one, and it's really, you can really feel it as you start to use Edge more frequently. The web just kind of feels faster and smoother. It's a great feeling. Same thing with this example is where, like, if you had something that was actually clicked to like request animation frame, where every frame you had to do some kind of chunk of code, it could push out the entire thing, an entire frame, which would make it even feel more stuttery and kind of gross. And so the same independent rendering thread allows everything to be updated just more smoothly. We also have a lot of efforts on making our SVGs faster. So that independent rendering is something we've been working on for over a year. And there is unfortunately a lot of ways in which you could opt out of that independent rendering thread. We had heuristics, and basically if you tripped one of them, it would cause that. And SVGs were unfortunately one of the ways that did that in previous versions. But now we've optimized all the things that you see here that previously would have meant that you did not have a independent rendering, but now you can with all these. So, yay. You can have use SVGs and just make the web faster without having to change anything. That's kind of our goal as a team. In addition, we've done a whole bunch of effort in our Canvas stack and WebGL stacks in order to make the web as fast as possible for just content that already exists. So you'll see here, smaller is better. I generally don't, so benchmarks showing things getting worse, so I guess that should be expected. Motion mark scores are up nearly 50%. This is a rendering performance benchmark from Apple. And there's a whole lot more inside of our performance. You can go to akams/eds-16-perf to see a lot more information on all of our performance updates. And then finally, we're going to talk about security. There's a ton here. I'm already running late, so I'm going to skip most of it. But basically, we constantly work to make Edge as secure as possible. This is a check that was done by the NSS Labs, where they see how many phishing emails and bad malicious links were automatically blocked by browsers. And you'll see that Microsoft Edge 16 was consistently higher than all the other major browsers on Windows. And there's a whole lot of mitigations that go into that that are really impressive. One of the things that I'm the most excited for was this thing called Windows Defender Application Guard. This is a feature that's built into Windows 10, which allows you to automatically launch Microsoft Edge inside of its own virtual machine. And so what that might sound like it's kind of heavy-handed or something, but it's pretty impressive. We inherited this technology from the cloud team. And it actually launches, you can't even tell the difference. It doesn't feel like a virtual machine. It feels like its own application. But what's great about this is that because it's inside of a virtual machine, this extremely lightweight virtual machine, even if there was a security vulnerability within Microsoft Edge, which, obviously we try to make sure that this happens as little as possible, the Application Defender Guard will actually block it from escaping. So if they escape the Edge sandbox, they have another layer of virtual machine before they can even get into the operating system. So it's just trying to stack as many different security optimizations on top of each other as possible to ensure that users are as safe as possible. And yeah, you can actually, if you want to get into the guts, you can whitelist individual domains to go around this firewall or around this VM. And there's all kinds of stuff there. You can check it out. I can talk about it more later. You can check out all the features that were landed in Edge 16 by going to aka.ms/edge-16. And yeah, like I said before, my name is Patrick Kettner. You can contact me on Twitter or the official MS Edge Dev account. If you want to go out and give feature requests for stuff that you think should exist, you can go to the Edge user voice where you can see all the different feature requests. You can make your own or upvote other people's. You can email me directly if you have questions or complaints about Microsoft Edge. That's my email, patkett@microsoft.com. Feel free to reach out. We want to make everything better, so please, do. So, yeah, that's everything. Sorry it was so fast, but I really wanted to get out. Cheers.
No, thank you so much. It's funny because I still feel like giving you guys 10 minutes is appropriate because everybody will do 15 minutes. If I gave you guys 15, everybody will do 20, right? So,
yeah.
No, really, really appreciate everybody updating us on the state of their browsers. I wanted to, start the conversation now with Rachel Andrew, who again is our W3C invited expert to the CSS working group. Very happy to have you, Rachel. Any questions you want to start off with for these gentlemen?
Yeah, wow, it's really cool to have everyone together like this. I talk a lot to web developers as I kind of wander around talking about CSS and things, and there's a very strange kind of idea out there that web browsers don't work together, despite the fact that I keep telling people that I go and sit in CSS working group meetings with people from web browsers who all talk to each other and are very nice to each other. So I think it's nice to have more of this kind of thing, and just to let people know that that's actually what goes on, that there is collaboration. And my sort of background to this was that I got into doing sort of standards work with the Web Standards Project, and I was a member of that in 2001. And back then, kind of one of the things that we used to say, it'd be really good if browsers would compete on things like how fast they were. That would be really good, and how secure they were. And that's kind of where we are now. The competition is in, who can make the fastest browser, who can make the most secure browser, and that's really cool because that's great for everyone, I think. It's really nice to hear all that sort of stuff. So,
sorry, Rachel, do you mind turning up your mic just a little bit more?
Quiet? Okay, is that any better?
Yes, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Cool. Right, excellent. So questions. We had a few questions in the chat that I made notes of. I guess I'll start actually with Edge, since we've just come from there. Quite a few people in the chat were saying, oh, the only problem really with Edge now is it's Windows only. When do we get our Linux or our Mac OS version of Edge? Is that ever something that would happen?
No, sure. Yeah, I mean, like one of my first browsers was Internet Explorer for Mac way back in the day, which was a really cool browser. But currently we're focused on making the best browser possible for Windows 10. We did release a version for Android and iOS recently. You can go out and check those on your smartphones. That's not the Edge rendering engine, but it does hook into our ecosystem. So your bookmarks and tabs will crawl across, that sort of a thing. We're absolutely always wanting to grow our market share as much as possible, but we want to make sure that we nail our experience on our home turf before we go and tackle other stuff.
Cool. Yeah, so it's great that people are actually really keen to, I think, use the browser, and that's sort of a nice thing to see. I think, and that really kind of ties into something that I've noticed as someone who speaks about sort of CSS and standards and things, and I find quite often when I, the last few years, I'll go and talk about things. I'll talk about new CSS. I'll say, well, this is CSS Grid, and this started with the Microsoft team, with IE10, and people will be like, oh, I didn't expect that. And I feel that there's this kind of sort of slow changing of hearts and minds, I guess, is sort of realizing that it's not all IE6, and it's kind of nice to see that sort of out there and see people actually realizing what work has been going on. At Microsoft with the browser.
It's been really neat to see all the effort that we're finally, I feel like we're at a point where culmination of years and years of effort are actually starting to bear fruit. So it's been really cool to be a part of the team.
I think so, yeah. Cool. What else have I got here? So Firefox, congratulations on the launch today.
Thank you. Yeah, like everybody in the office, the last few weeks, everyone in the office is like, oh, we've got to get everything ready. Actually, the code's been like, I haven't really noticed it because I run nightly, and most of the stuff was committed a while ago. It's actually been a fairly smooth release. It's more been about the advertising, and like Lynn's blog got on #1 Hacker News. That was the top post on Hacker News yesterday for like the whole day.
So yes, I imagine there were lots of comments there. Yeah. So I mean, if someone listening has moved to Chrome years ago, and why should they? What's the kind of the elevator pitch? Why should they try out Firefox now?
So our pitch is fast for good. We have done a lot of work to make it fast and smooth, and are continuing to do that while also beefing up our privacy and user data tools. And we're going to continue doing that. At the same time, when you use Firefox, a lot of people don't know this. So Firefox Mozilla is two parts. There's Mozilla, the company, which makes the browser and a few other products. But we're wholly owned by the Mozilla Foundation. And the foundation does a lot of really wonderful things to help keep the internet open and free. And so when you're using Firefox, you're helping support that mission, which can be lobbying Congress to keep net neutrality, or working with data privacy advocates in Europe, or helping to bring mobile internet to rural areas in India. There's just a tremendous amount of amazing stuff that I didn't know about actually until last week when I met some of them at our offsite. So you're helping to support that when you're using Firefox.
That's pretty cool. I think that's something that would interest a lot of people who might not realize that either. So you sort of, I don't know, browsers are software, and it's sort of learning that there are these companies behind browsers and organizations behind browsers doing really interesting things, as well as just showing websites.
And so we're taking the Quantum launch opportunity to really let people know that, because most people don't.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so Beaker, new to me, I have to admit to not having really looked into Beaker other than when I realized that we're going to be talking about it. I had a quick look at the website, so I've learned something today, which is cool. I kind of wonder, I mean, I'm kind of an old nerd, so I know a bit about peer-to-peer stuff. I've, experienced peer-to-peer things, over the years. I'm also a business person. I get to deal with exciting things like data protection, and now in Europe, the GDPR, and things like that. And I kind of was just sort of thinking, once you've got various people essentially hosting bits of data, because one of the problems with data protection sort of in the EU and in Europe is this issue of transferring data between place to place. And when you have to deal with these people, the sort of data protection people, they don't understand a lot about the internet, if you find quite often, and like where data actually is and why things might be being moved around. And I just wondered if you could speak a little bit about that sort of issue of, well, where is the data and what do I fill in on my form if that's what's happening?
Yeah, the intuition kind of gets shifted around a little bit, especially when you throw in a new technology like this. The basic model to start to think about is just we're adding in something that normally you don't see, which is one computer talking directly to another computer. So maybe the first answer would be, well, you're not going to use a server in this case. So it's just my computer talking to yours. Then, of course, the way the security works right now actually is that if you have the URL, then you can find the data. But you actually have to have the URL to find it. The network's encrypted. So each of those links is kind of like a secret share link. And if we had somebody who was saying, okay, cool, I guess, but I need to have, be really sure that only my boss and myself and my coworker have the data. In the future, we could add authentication to the model so that you say only these 3 devices can talk, can get this data. But the key to, I think, remember is that it doesn't, there's nothing magical about this. We're not pushing the data out to anonymous computers at any stretch. It's really just adding in the idea that you can have computers talking directly to each other, and then the servers become optional.
Yeah. Yeah, as sort of just kind of saying that came to mind because I get to deal with these things. It's one of the fun things. And I think there's a lot more of awareness generally of people about this stuff, and certainly in Europe, because we're even the tiniest business ends up having to deal with it. So
yeah.
But yeah, it's sort of interesting, and I definitely like the idea of being able to just sort of share stuff that easily with other people, and it's an interesting model that the browser again being more than just something that shows websites.
Yeah, the browser is the platform.
Yeah, that's cool. That's an interesting idea. So it's been great to learn a bit about it.
Thanks.
So again, about browsers doing interesting things other than just showing us websites. I was looking at so with Brave and this new sort of method of doing advertising. Again, that's something that's really interesting to me. This new way for content creators to actually make money, because I've been involved with various. I'm currently editor-in-chief of Smasher Magazine. I've been I'm involved with The List Apart. Drew and I have 24 Ways. I know about publishing content and how difficult it actually is to make money off that. My sort of thinking around this model is that it sounds wonderful. However, all the spammy, horrible, tracky techniques work. And what the kind of the sort of thing is, how do we move content creators away from them saying, well, if I do this, it works, it brings people back, I can do all this retargeting, I can follow them around the internet with, running shoes or pans or whatever it is that you're being followed about everywhere because you've been tracked. How do we actually start to get people moving over and saying, okay, I'm going to stop using these techniques? I can see that being this huge hurdle. How we get people from point A, where they're doing all the spammy tracking stuff because it works. How do we get them over to a better model? Because I would love them to be in the better model generally.
We actually see publishers that are waking up this year. It's different from our past year's interactions. And we have some partners we're doing actual new projects with to use the basic attention token. In past years, they were sort of angry if you're an ad blocker by default. They didn't see how that could possibly help them. But you have to realize that they're already seeing a number of their readers using ad blockers. So for us, there's just pure upside. And with an ad blocker user, you'll see a publisher try to put out a dialogue saying, lower your shields or subscribe or go away. And every publisher that's tried this, going back to Wired 2 years ago, has just seen their Alexa scores go down. I can't find one good example from this. There are companies like SourcePoint and PageFair. I'm friendly with Johnny Ryan at PageFair and others, and they're trying to help publishers turn around the ad blocker cohort, but it's really hard. A lot of the ad blocker users will not lower their shields, and rightly so. When Forbes in January 2016 said, lower your shields for a lighter ad experience, malvertising got placed. The trackers that the malware vendors, ransomware vendors use, found the fresh meat and targeted it. It was really horrible. So I think ad blocker users are rightly skeptical of this plea to lower your shields. Publishers who see that they have 30% of their readers using ad blockers and see the difficulty turning that around, realize that if they all switch to Brave overnight, which won't happen, but if they did, that would be like a 43% lift. 3 over 7, if the revenue recovery happened through the new basic attention token mediated ways. And we think that's a way for us to proceed, because once you paint a picture where it's not a zero-sum game, it's a positive-sum game, and these users are not going to lower their shields, then you start getting some interest. You also, because we have the basic attention token and the user growth pool I mentioned, 300 million plus 66 million reserved tokens that we can give to users, publishers see that there is value in that, getting adoption, driving people to try new things like very frictionless small dollar amount or pound amount payments for premium content, or engagement in sort of fantasy football, fantasy stock portfolio type games. So that's what we're pursuing. Our primary constituency is the users. If we get enough users, if we share the bat with other apps and it becomes a growing union of apps, I think the publishers will just keep coming on board. They're already coming on board, but more and more over time based on the users, excuse me, the user first constituency. And I'm pretty optimistic that this will happen. The advertisers are even more game because I think they're very flexible. They have, they'll go wherever there's an audience. You mentioned retargeting. If you talk to Jason Kint, who runs a publisher trade group called Digital Content Next, US top names, but also some small and mediums, the premium publishers who are forming a private marketplace called TrustX. Jason is a sort of a friend and supporter of Brave. He knows that the ad blocker users won't lower their shields, but he also doesn't believe that retargeting works as well as people think. It gives you a little immediate lift in yield because it reaches someone who forgot to click or nags you against your interests to click, tempts you, but it also drives people to adopt ad blockers. So there's this negative externality that isn't accounted for in the sort of early or short-term analytics. And ad blocking really does take people out of the ecosystem altogether. So I think retargeting could even be a wash if you accounted for the ad blocking cost.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And do you think this would work for small publishers as well? I mean, there's obviously some huge publishers of content, but how does this sort of trickle down to people who are, small scale publishers of stuff, even on their own blogs or what have you?
We actually had somebody from naturalhomes.org, a nice man in the UK, who started this sort of build your own Hobbit house site on his own, with builders around the world. And at some point he said, I have a lot of ad blocker users. I'm going to put up a badge because there's a standard way to detect ad blockers. I'm going to say, please drop your shields. And all his readers said, what are you trying to do? We're mad at you now. So he said, okay. And on his own initiative, he said, please try Brave. So I think the small publishers are actually hurting worse as the economies of scale, both on the ad platforms, and the ad platforms are owned by publishers too, and the big publishers who can do direct sales and so on. The economies of scale are going to the bigs. I remember when programmatic started, 7 or 8 years ago, it started out well and people made better money, but over time, there's been a race to the bottom, and the small and medium publishers have been hurting more than the bigs. So I think we level the playing field because we can connect audience directly to publisher, and with even before the BAT ads, if we just have the donation system, some of those sites do have a strong donor cohort who will tithe. They'll do a Patreon-style pin of their share of their monthly budget in Brave to that site.
Cool. No, it's certainly very interesting. It's something I'll be watching with great interest to see how it develops, because I think everyone who's at all involved in publishing content knows how difficult it currently is. So it's great to see. it's great to see any efforts towards improving that. I think for the sort of idea of having independent content on the web. So that's really cool. With Chrome, I've got a kind of pet peeve, and I'm going to bring it up here because it was kind of mentioned. Now, so my main product is a small CMS, and so we have lots of people. We're essentially a WordPress competitor. So people install the software on a site. They build a site for a small client, some shop or whatever, and then they go away. Typically, they don't particularly have an ongoing relationship with that client. They move on to the next thing. A lot of them are building sites for not a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
They're just building, people's first website or, some little portfolio site, and off they go. And over the last few months, I guess, and it's not just Chrome, but Chrome seems to come up quite a lot. They get in touch with us and they say, my client has got in touch with me, and my client has said that their site is insecure. And what they're talking about is, of course, the new message that they're seeing when they go to the login form for their CMS. Now, I agree that everybody should be on HTTPS. I would like the web to be fully secure, but I think there is a set of people who do not understand what has happened, and they're not benefiting from all the other things that they're not using APIs, they're not doing anything, they're just building sites for clients, and they've suddenly got people that built a site for 3 years ago coming and having a go at them. And I feel like there should have maybe been more outreach to that group of people, because they're a significant number who's kind of have got forgotten in because if you're working on you've got an ongoing relationship when you're building the site all the time, or it's an in-house thing, this isn't so much a problem. And Let's Encrypt is not the solution for all of these people. More of their hosts now have got Let's Encrypt integration, but a significant number don't. And actually getting a secure certificate even is a big hurdle for them. I was kind of wondering, whether there's been discussion about them. There must be a big chunk of the web who's never going to go HTTPS.
I mean, yeah, I think the graph that we've got was showing kind of traffic as a proportion of, the secure traffic as a proportion of all traffic, essentially, which is different from the actual number of sites that have migrated to HTTPS or secure origin at this point. I think there's a very perfectly valid point about maybe we probably weren't strong enough in some of this kind of outreach, especially the newer forms. I think this is probably the first time that quite a few extra people have heard about forms being marked as insecure. Yeah, it's a problem, right? That we've got to try and work out how we message these things. I don't know how to message them much more. Like we go through a kind of standard, beta channel or dev or canary dev channel, beta channel. But even then, we find that the proportion of developers or businesses who kind of see this, they don't see it basically. So we're trying to push more through things like the Webmaster Console when we know these type of things are going to come through, because that reaches a completely different audience than the normal Chrome developer tools reach. There's been talk about doing kind of more promotion. But I think the question is, like, who do we promote to? Like, people have asked us to put on like Google.com. Because, hey, change happening. I mean, I don't know how we target those, like target the actual information to people where it's relevant either at the moment. So I don't have an answer at the moment, outside of we just need to be a lot more proactive in when these changes are coming through. Kind of messaging this, but like, there's some things where, like, I don't think we're going to stop forms being submitted. It's just that we're going to mark them as insecure at this point. I did see a poll going around that maybe we won't allow people to click on links which are insecure at some point. I don't think that's ever going to happen. But it's one of those things of just, I don't have a good answer, because I don't think we've got a decent answer at all about how this is working. We're trying to kind of push the security of the entire web ecosystem forwards as much as we can on our side. And like it requires some painful choices at the same time. Like internally, we had a team who had a big advertising campaign for pushing people to do geolocation, click to locate your store, and it like they didn't know that this change was coming through either. Like for geolocation behind a secure origin.
Yeah.
and they were hit by it, and they had all their customers hit by it, and we didn't effectively message it on my team to their team because we didn't know. So I don't have an answer, I think, but I'm definitely open to different ways of actually how we can try and educate as many people as possible that these changes are coming through. I do think sometimes the timeline is pretty tight as well. So it could be like 18 weeks from kind of inception to actually shipping it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I know. I think definitely through the webmaster tools, because a lot of the clients themselves will be using those tools, you know, to do stuff. And it's, yeah, I mean, I kind of have a foot in both camps. You know, I want all of the cool stuff, and I want the web to be secure, but then I can really see the pain in people who are already finding it quite difficult to make a living, as things like, you know, Squarespace and so on take a lot of that end of the market. You know, and to have all your clients come back to you and say, "What's going on here?" You know, is not good.
Yeah. I think we don't have a good connection with the entire ecosystem, or the broader base of the ecosystem. I think it's a fair criticism as well.
Yeah, cool. So that's just my little bugbear, really. Yeah.
I think it's a lot of people's bugbear. It's not. it has come up quite a few times. It's just.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those ones which is like, I think Chrome is happy to bite the bullet sometimes and taking the heat of, you know, developer frustration and user frustration as well, or kind of, you know, business frustration in terms of trying to push this, you know, ideal forwards at least.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, I mean, it's also on the hosting companies and the hosting companies that aren't offering people an easy way to do this, because they exist, but they also are hosting companies who are running, you know, horrendously out of date PHP and so on. So that's really difficult, because people are very much tied to some of these inexpensive hosts that are refusing to do anything. And maybe there's an avenue there at chasing these hosting companies into behaving themselves. But yeah, cool. Thank you. I think that was most of the questions I had. I don't know if we've got any other.
Yeah, no, I definitely have a few different questions, which I think a few people answered. I mean, let me see. One question from Matt, a recent one, was benchmarks like ARES6, FishGL, and Jetstream are very slow and sometimes even crash the browser on Xbox One. In the Fall Creators Update, is the browser non-profile optimized on that platform?
Sure. First of all, thanks for the question. And secondly, no, I mean, it's something we definitely look into. The stability benchmark performance, in the sense of like how it runs on the end user, isn't necessarily the biggest priority. Like, we want to make sure that the average we take a lot of, we look at what a lot of people do on the web browser in whatever platform, whether it's Xbox, Windows Mobile, or the desktop, and we try to optimize for those experiences first. And we definitely need to improve a lot of our performance in the WebVR world. Those are all WebVR related benchmarks, or WebGL related benchmarks rather. And yeah, we still definitely have work to do, but it's just in our most recent release, I guess it wasn't considered the biggest priority compared with other stability fixes we were adding.
Yeah, a lot of I think again, one of the exciting things about getting everybody together and having this is that you guys are probably able to hear some of the cool updates that are happening within the other browsers. So do you guys have any questions for each other, or things that you guys are excited about working together?
Actually, I have one question, and it's based off a question that's come up, which was there's ad blocking for crypto miners without mining the. I have no clue how to even kind of how people might solve that, but the answer was Brave has blocked crypto miners for some time. Is that because it's based off third-party scripts and the blocking that happens there, or is there something special that's going on in?
A lot of ad blockers have shared a block list for crypto miners because they are indeed based on third-party scripts. You know, fingerprinting is done at scale through third-party scripts. So curated block lists still work. We're going beyond that with machine learning, and you have to be willing to sometimes do offline or crawling and then feed that learning into the browser. But block lists are still necessary at scale, and increasingly not sufficient, right? Block lists like HSTS super cookies are a thing. I don't know if anybody knows about this. Criteo is one of the few ad tech companies that made it to big scale without having to be bought by Oracle. And they are using HSTS super cookies. HSTS is strict transport security, where you can have sort of a local cache that remembers whether, if someone types in mybank.com, they really always want to go directly to https://mybank.com. But there's a bit of state there, because the first time they'll go through the HSTS protocol and go through the insecure path, which is vulnerable to man in the middle. And then after that, they'll always go secure. So that little bit of state, 1 bit per site, can be used, and is used, we learned by Criteo and others probably, to create a bunch of fake domains and use HSTS to step them up to TLS and embed them across different sites, and you get an n-bit string of a tracking identifier from that technique. This can be blocked. Brave can block this, and we will. We're talking to other browsers who might want to block this. There are just a lot of ways to track you. And so it comes down to a constant cat and mouse game. But the practical techniques, the ones that are used at scale, are fewer, and they're more stable because the people who use them don't really have the expertise to develop or evolve them. So you end up with a power law distribution. You can block the tall head.
Right. That's cool. Thanks.
Okay, so another question was, again, a lot of really great questions about the stuff that I think Beaker and Brave are doing. There's a question about BAT. So is the expectation that in the future users are going to be able to easily obtain BAT tokens? It seems like a big hurdle is getting enough user base that can attain the ETH and BAT tokens.
So BAT is separate from Ethereum or Ethers. We have this user growth pool, so we will give users tokens. What's cooler than making users buy tokens is actually giving them tokens. And then they can buy them after that. That's already available in Brave for the automated contributions. That panel I showed, Brave Payments in the preferences, is already in Brave. You can use that now. You can fund your BAT wallet. Currently, the options for funding it are all cryptocurrencies, but we're working on allowing fiat. We had a beta program that used Bitcoin, and Coinbase provided a way of buying that with fiat currency in the US, but it had some limitations. So we're going to bring back fiat, but right now, if you can buy Bitcoin, which is not that hard to do, for instance, you can do it at Coinbase, then you can send that Bitcoin to your Brave instance, your user wallet, and you can fund it with BAT. It'll be exchanged for the basic attention token. But we're very close. I'm not going to say when. Very close to giving out the first user grants to give users some BAT to fill their wallet, have some change in their pocket, and enable contributions and other new behaviors based on feeling a little flush with basic attention tokens.
Another question that I don't think came up yet. Hold on, where was it? Yes, so WebUTP, so this is Tim's question. WebUTP are custom DNS in browsers. So is there ever going to be a protocol that allows UDP hole punching? Because WebRTC is a little bit too complicated.
This is something we're pretty interested in, actually. The question comes down to, can you establish connections like a WebRTC data channel with another computer without having to use a signaling server? And you also want to get better performance. WebRTC takes sometimes up to a second or two to get a connection going, and that can be kind of a problem. So to do that, we're looking at creating a DHT that can do hole punching. And that would make it possible that you don't have to, you can use kind of a shared signaling server resource that just is communally owned. So then you don't have to have central servers anymore running your signalers. To do that, we actually need to have a authentication system that's decentralized. So there's a couple of steps that have to happen first. We need to solve key distribution, and then we can begin to have a shared DHT where we can do signaling. The other thing that we're looking at is maybe we could bootstrap off of the DAT infrastructure where you don't have to do hole punching anymore, and instead you can use UTP directly to create connections with each other. It really depends on actually, I think that really comes down to the same authentication problem. How do you know you're talking to the right person? And so to solve that, we have to solve decentralized identities first. And that's a problem that actually we think we could solve, because the DAT network is a nice cryptographic network. So we can create these trust relationships between people and start to solve key distribution in similar ways to, for instance, what Keybase does, and build that into the browser so that you can then set up that secure connection without having to trust the signaling system in between. So that was a whole lot of technical mess, but that is something we're taking seriously.
Anyone
Actually, I have one thing. Sorry. Basically, when it's a weird edge case that you can actually have raw UDP inside of certain situations in Edge. Effectively, when you install a PWA within using Microsoft Edge, you'll get what's actually under the covers a UWP platform or app, which is the application format for Windows 10. And as a result, you have access to all the WinRT APIs. So you actually would have access to the networking.sockets interfaces. So you'd have raw UDP access, at least from within a installed PWA in Microsoft Edge. Yeah, I mean, it's not really on the broad web as a whole or anything, but if you happen to want to play with UDP packets in the browser, it is a way to go about starting to play with that.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing with trusted web activities. Doesn't feel open webby though at that point.
Yeah, no, it definitely doesn't. It's an interesting way to start playing with some of these things, and it does allow people like myself to start building polyfills for more open web things like Web Bluetooth or Web NFC on top of the underlying OS stuff. Because I'm not a C programmer, I can't do crap there, but I can write JavaScript for days. And so I wrote like a Web Bluetooth polyfill on top of the WinRT Bluetooth APIs in about a week and a half. And that sort of thing, I think getting to play with the low level stuff, it makes it a lot more things possible at an earlier stage.
Another question is from Zach. What is the process of browsers collecting royalties from search engines? Does Google pay royalties to the browser per search directed at Google?
I presume that's for me to answer. I have no clue.
I can tell you a little bit about this just because we got to talk to the CFO and ask, like, how does Mozilla make money? We do not get paid per search. We essentially negotiate a deal with for like a year or 3 years or whatever it is with search providers for different geolocations. And in fact, I believe as of today, some of our deals in a few states, a few countries, including the United States, have changed. So we do get paid, but we also impose certain rules about tracking, and we always say that user freedom trumps money. So, there are certain deals we won't take because they would restrict user freedom too much. Fortunately, we're in good financial health, and we are keeping our costs down. So you won't have to worry about that.
We have a deal with. I just wanted to add, we have a deal with DuckDuckGo that is performing, and it's DuckDuckGo has a strong privacy policy, so it is possible to get those kind of deals. Bing also does browser revenue share deals. It's unusual for Google to do them now, in my opinion. Obviously, we did the big one with Firefox when I was at Mozilla in 2004, back in the old days with Google, and that was right after Safari did a big deal that they've renewed also.
Cool. So I have one last question just for everybody here is, how do people get more involved? What do you think people can do? And just sort of what do you want from the community? Maybe 30 seconds for each person.
I can start. So stuff from the community. Biggest thing, I think, across all browsers is just feedback. Using the official forums, whether it be Twitter or Edge User Voice, for example, just letting us know what you want, what you're looking for. It's great. And then the other thing is start using new APIs. We use those to signal whether or not things are actually interesting to developers. It's really easy to rat hole as a spec person on what sounds cool, but it's it's much more compelling to actually see websites agree that it is cool and start using it. And it helps us determine what to implement if we're not the first one to do it.
I would say just Let everybody know they should try, if they tried Firefox before and moved away, to give it another chance.
That's a fun one. Brendan, before you answer your question, somebody said, why is type of null an object? So answer that question. That's the question.
Oh, goodness. Probably because I was in a tearing hurry to get the demo done, and then it shipped right away. JavaScript was kind of a hack, and a lot of the early things in Netscape were hacks. Cookies were a hack, and you can hack in haste and repent at leisure. So, V8 tried valiantly to change type of null the other year under a flag, and it just was not web compatible at all, as predicted. It had to do with how null was an object in the tagging system inside the original Mocha interpreter. So you have some languages have objects that can never be null, and a lot of languages going back to Algol famously have null inhabiting the object type. That's something Tony Hoare called the billion-dollar mistake. Rust avoids that bug in language design. JavaScript, like Java, does not, and furthermore, type of null is object. Can't be changed, sorry. What I think people should do, I'm going to sharpen the discussion here slightly, because I think the big browsers do tend to get captured by business interests like search and ads and stuff. It just happens. This is just part of life. But users' interests can diverge from those big business interests. Because there are conflicts. Those businesses have to serve public stock markets. They have to serve publishers or advertisers' interests too. And people talk about the Hollywood versus user DRM conflict. That's been hot this year, of course. I would encourage people to try different browsers. Try Beaker, try Brave, try browsers that go outside the old 90s mold of or even 2004 era, 2008 era mold, because I think there is a better web that requires users to band together and represent their interests against these conflicting interests. And doesn't have to be Brave, but I do think there are options out there emerging. Privacy is one way to express this. Safety is another, from malware. But it's getting to be important. I think the European General Data Protection Regulation, the companion e-privacy are important. They're based on old principles of consent to tracking without coercion, and there's long legal precedent, regulatory precedent there. So I think
Hello.
Hi, did you drop out as well? Did everyone drop out?
Yeah, I don't know.
I got cut off for a second. That was weird.
Yeah, I think everyone did.
Oh,
Paul, do you want to ask your
was
friends at
brief,
Google if something happened?
Just 1 second, I don't know.
Yeah.
That was really weird. Yeah. Where did we leave off? Sorry, Brendan, did you finish? That was weird.
I hope so. I mean, I was just saying, try new browsers that try to break the mold and move the user's interests forward against the big. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Who else is left?
I'm really sorry. I actually have to jump off. I'm
Yeah,
late for another meeting, but thank you so much. This is wonderful, and I'm sure Paul is right, so listen to him. Cheers.
I can go next. I was actually the same mind as Patrick, more than anything else. Is I think sometimes we have to be held to account and task a little bit more in terms of prioritizing the user and developer needs at this point. Like if things are whether it's like the HTTPS issues and things like that, we do need to be told more as well. So like keep on the books, keep on the issue trackers. I think is always good. We do try and throw out surveys every so often. We need to do more. We need to engage with developers a lot more as well. So those type of things are always useful because things on bug trackers, for instance, get heard. Product teams hear it. and then they can help like start to prioritize it. Not always, but in most cases they do. So.
Yeah.
You know, for us, we're so young that we're reading every single issue, the entire team. So every one that gets reported makes a huge impact for us, making sure that things work. And we put out pretty frequently little specs and explanations of what we're working on. So if you ever see what we're working on and you want to tell us what you think works and what doesn't, or if you want to actually try out the stuff and just give us that feedback, that's what really matters for us right now, because we're really trying some of the experiments were kind of wild ideas. And so hearing back from people is huge for us right now. So just check it out, give it a shot, and let us know.
Break things.
Exactly.
Awesome. And then Rachel, what about you? Just, you're so involved. What do you recommend for other people, or, especially as a part of the W3C and CSS working group?
Yeah, so all of our work at the CSS working group happens in the open. You can see what we're doing. We have all of the issues against the specs are on GitHub, so just like any open source project. So if you kind of want to contribute to CSS, that's a really good place to start. See which issues have been raised against CSS Grid, for example, and the things that maybe might go into level 2 of the spec, because work kind of doesn't stop here with what's shipped into browsers. We're looking at what we might solve next. There's lots of ways to get involved, and if you get involved with CSS, there's actually very few people who really do. And I always say to developers, if you don't take an interest, you're leaving kind of the future of the platform in the hands of a very, very few people who bother to contribute. So if there's something that you're really interested in, in CSS or in any part of the platform, go and find out how it's made, find out who the people are. You can get involved. It's all happening, actually out there in the open. And also do log bugs against browsers. If you find things that are broken, let people know about it, because that's how we make it better.
Yeah, well, that's so great. Well, thank you everybody for joining. Just letting you all know that you can sign up for more events like this. We'll probably be doing one every month or every other month starting next year on different things like State of CSS, State of Build Tools, State of Frameworks, etc. So this.co/JavaScript. Or you can follow this.media on Twitter at this.media as well. All these folks are on Twitter, so everybody is pretty available and happy to talk all the time. I'm actually very happy and impressed that the Edge team will spend time like debugging my silly things sometimes, and same thing with the Chrome team. So thank you everybody, and we hope to see you at the next one. And thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you guys for having us.
Thanks everybody.
Cool, thank you.